Oh wow, that's really pale. Candor, wait, it's Candor, Abnegation, Dauntless, Erudite, and then what was the other one? Those characters were just meant to die. You see a lot of weird stuff on the Amtrak train. Live happily ever after. I wish. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I am going to be doing a review on the acclaimed Divergent book. I finally finished rereading it after so many years. Today it's kind of like a get ready with me type thing. I'm thinking about doing this more with reviews in general. I really like makeup. I really like books and movies and TV shows. I thought maybe I can combine all. It took me a while to read this novel just because I'm busy all the time. The novel is everything I remembered, and then at the same time while I was reading it, I kept thinking to myself, why was I in love with this book when I first read it? Because it's not that special. The characters are kind of yeah, they're okay. They're not bad characters by any means. I want to like the book. I remember the movie so much more than I remember the books. And I do believe that I was reading the book simultaneously while the movies were coming out. So you have Trish and you have her family and her brother, Caleb, who's a very important character later on in the series. They live in Chicago, which my hometown Chicago, just as rundown as it always has been, even in the Divergent series. Set into the future, and they're all separated into factions, they call them. The different factions have different names to them, and there is Candor, Abnegation, Amity, and then you have Dauntless, Erudite, and then there are the factionless who are basically just homeless. And all of them are kind of just segregated by colors. That's kind of how I remember them. They all have like their different traits. Like Dauntless is like bravery. They can't be cowardice. And like Candor is like they always tell the truth and they wear black and white. And then Erudite always wears blue, and they're very smart, intellectual people who wear glasses to make them look more intellectual. Amity, who are like always happy and working in the farm area. And then you have Abnegation, who are selfless, who don't believe in vanity and who always wear gray clothes. Then you have the factionless, who are basically just homeless and don't have a faction. A funny thing is that when I was younger, I didn't know how to pronounce Dauntless at the time because, you know, nobody was really actually saying the word out loud. So in my head, I don't know why I thought this, but in my brain, I was kind of like, okay, nobody really likes the Dauntless because they're fighters, right? And it kind of reminds me of the army. So I'm like, is their name a play on the words of don't enlist? You have Beatrice Pryor. As a 16-year-old at the time, I really wanted to, you know, root for her, and honestly her name just like says it all. Beatrice Pryor. She's just really she's kind of vanilla, not like, she's just bland. Like there's nothing really to her, and as the story progresses you kind of realize that she really has nothing to fight for or to live for. Hard. And maybe that's just my personal opinion, but she just isn't really developed. Like she's developed to like the bare minimum. Oh wow, that's really pale. She is a part of the Abnegations. Her parents are part of the leaders. Each section has their own set of leaders. The Abnegation are the ones that kind of like control the food and the rations within the city. All of the other sectors don't really like the Abnegation because they think that they're just hoarding all the food. And then you also have these other people who nobody wants to be categorized as them because they can't fit into the system, they can't be easily manipulated, and they're called Divergent, the title of the book. And everyone knows about them except for Trish. But the weird thing is that a lot of Divergent people come out of Abnegation for some weird reason, and it's kind of really hard to believe because they're supposed to be the most selfless people, and like there's nothing really special about them other than that. So like in my head I would think, wouldn't Divergent people come out more from either like Candor or Dauntless or Erudite? I don't know, but no, they all come out from like the boring faction. Or it could have been cool if all the Divergent people come out of the faction list because, you know, they can't fit into any of the other sectors because their faction list, they failed. I feel like there's a lot of a setup for her parents. Her parents kind of actually seem like really distant, and I understand that like they're supposed to be because they're not supposed to give her love and they're supposed to be selfless and this and this and this, and like she can only be spoken to when it's her turn, and you know, she's the one that doesn't fit. She's the oddball ball out, even though I do feel like she does fit in her family like way more than she thinks she does. It's just like they're not loving and they're also really secretive, and you don't really get to know them as characters because they're just her parents. They're just there to be like, hey, don't speak when you're spoken to. And then her brother is kind of just, he's just annoying. He's not a horrible person, but he's just an annoying person who like is always a goody two-shoes brother, and like he's the favorite child. And I'm kind of just like, I feel like their names match their characters way too much. I'm like, Caleb, you would be the favorite child. Like, your name just says it all. They get into a simulation because it helps them decide where they want to go and which faction they want to choose or whatever, which I don't fully understand the mechanics of this serum because it's supposed to tell them where they belong, but they still have a choice as to where the hell they want to go. So like, what does it even matter? It's kind of like those online websites where it's like, oh, you could be a doctor, but like, what if you wanted to be a forensic scientist? Like, okay, you told me my answer, but I'm gonna go do this instead. So like, what does it matter if I fit into this group? Okay, they still have a choice. I don't understand the whole idea of the serum because I'm like, okay, like I belong in erudite and dauntless, okay, but what if I want to go and hang out with the amenity people in the fields? I can do that. I don't have to follow your rules. And the whole idea is that like Divergent doesn't follow, but like what if like the person just isn't Divergent and just wants to like go somewhere else? Anyway, so I'm getting complicated, but okay. So Trish, turns out she's Divergent because her simulation didn't go very well. She chose like different choices that she could fit into all of them except for, I believe, Amity. She just didn't fit into that category for some weird reason. Even though she's supposed to be like the most Divergent person ever, you would think that she would fit into all the categories. She's like, I don't know what the heck that is. And then her test giver, who I can't remember what her name is, like, you can't tell anybody. If you tell anybody, you will die. She goes home and this creepy factionless guy like kind of hits on her when she goes back home, and then they have the choosing ceremony. So it's kind of also weird because her brother is in the group of choosing ceremonies with her, but he's a year older than her. Logistics don't matter here in the world of Divergent. Finds out that like her brother chooses erudite, and she, because like the whole entire time she's like, oh my god, my brother is like the family favorite, he's so gonna stay in abnegation. Brother is just like, before, remember like where we belong and like do what's right for the family. And then he chooses erudite because he's a know-it-all. Go wear your fake glasses, why don't you? Trish is like super shocked because she's like, oh my god, like why would he choose erudite? Do I not even know my own brother? And I'm like, clearly we don't even know your family. Like, we only knew like a little bit about their family here and there, but like they were super secretive. All we knew was that her parents were government officials and her brother is a know-it-all, and she just doesn't belong in the group. One of these things is not like the other. Can you tell? Like, no, because they're all kind of the same. So when they choose, they have like different bowls for each faction. So like Dauntless has coal and fire, and then I think erudite has glass, and I can't remember what the other ones have because they're not important yet. They're not important until the next book. So anyway, so she's just like, I'm gonna choose Dauntless at the last minute, you know, and like everybody's shocked because like, oh my god, like God forbid that like an abnegation family would lose both of their children, because who would want to leave abnegation? But then you find out that like all of these factions are actually horrible factions because they don't have the same views that they did when they first were formed, and now they're corrupted. When I was younger, when I first read it, I was kind of like, that's really left field. Like, you were supposed to be selfless, like this sweet abnegation person, and then now you go into Dauntless. Like, I understand that like complete 180, and that's a cool thing. But at the same time, can you give me some background story as to why you chose it? Like, don't just choose like, okay, I'm gonna go join the military today because why not? Like, she does explain it later on that like, oh, I did it because I saw these kids jumping off of the train, because that's what Dauntless like to do. They're daredevils. They like to jump off of the Amtrak, which kudos to Veronica Roth for talking about the Amtrak, because I remember at the age of 15 I used to have to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning to sleep on the Amtrak to get to school. You see a lot of weird stuff on the Amtrak train. Not as weird as what this looks like on my face, but go into initiation pretty much. They get to see their parents one last time after their initiation, but then after that they can't talk to them ever again, which, I mean, cool. Never get to see your parents again, and we never get to know who they really are as people. It's like, bye mom and dad, I barely got to know you, but okay, bye. You can tell that Trish has like this emotional attachment to her mom, but like nothing is really developed. We don't get to see her, you know, help her when she's injured or like her younger years or anything like that. It's just like my mom cuts my hair, and like and I know I can't look in the mirror, and like this is about me, it's not about her. But we're kind of trying to figure out who her and her mom are, but it's just like, no, this is about me, not about my mom. My mom's just cutting my hair. It's just a simple thing I like to do, but okay, it's fine. Then she gets initiated. So apparently not many abnegation people go into Dauntless. I wonder why. Maybe it's because she's divergent. Can we just like hone that in even more? You are divergent. That's something that like a lot of people talk about within the series. Like, it's so funny that to be a divergent just means to be a normal human being, because that's pretty much what it is. You're normal. You can't be controlled. You're just a normal angsty teenager. Also keep in mind, I think Trish is 16 when she goes in, so just all the more merrier for me to remember these are children in YA books. And in my head I'm like, because I had to constantly remind myself while I was reading this novel that she was 16, because a lot of what she does just doesn't make sense for a 16-year-old. I'm 22, and if I was in her position, I would not act the same way. I would probably be in flight mode. They're doing their initiation. She meets a group of kids in her age bracket who transferred. A lot of them are transfers from like Candor and Erudite and other places, but she's the only abnegation kid, and they all call her Stiff because they all call abnegation people stiffs. And I'm like, haha, funny, they're emotionless, but whatever. So then they're initiated. She meets this girl named Christina and Will, and are kind of, they're just really one-noted too. I mean, Christina, she's a little bit more, you know, a little bit more about her and her fears and like what she likes and what she doesn't like, but we don't really get to have like that one-on-one girl time with her all the time. Like, oh my god, like this happened to me and this happened to me and I love you and you love me. It's more like, no, it's just all about Trish. Trish is like the first person to jump off of this building because they have to be initiated, and then it turns out that there's just a net at the bottom, which, I mean, when I first read that scene, I was like, oh my god, she's gonna die. This is ridiculous. I have a fear of heights, and if I would not be doing the things that Trish would do, even if I was a divergent. Nuh-uh. You can't pay me to go up on there and then tell me to jump off of a ledge. That ain't happening, okay? You're gonna have to knock me out to make me go down there. And some other characters that are there are this character Molly, who is this buff macho girl who doesn't like Trish, and then this other character named Peter, and I hate Peter so much. He does things that, like, you know, he's the bad guy, but at the same time, like, he just does things that don't make a lot of sense, because you're kind of like, okay, why would you do that? Like, especially towards the end of the novels, but it's like, why would you do this? Like, it comes out of left field. She meets Four. Me and my friend talk about this all the time, and we're kind of like, you know, Veronica must have been really proud of herself when she named a character Four, because, like, so cool. A character's name is Four. And I'm not gonna lie, I like the name Four only because I don't like his real name. Because his real name, I'm just like, why would you name him that? He's supposed to be the cool guy. He's supposed to be her love interest. He is an interesting character. I really do love him. He's like tech savvy. He's also really strong and very brave and a lot more selfless than Trish is. It's funny to me because I'm like, He's 18, of course, he's more wise than she is. And he's just a better character, in my personal opinion, than Trish is. Four asked her, what's your name? And she's like, B. And she's like, no, wait, it's Trish. And then it's so weird because later on everybody finds out that her real name is Beatrice anyway. And it's like, okay, whatever. Oh, another character she meets is Al. And Al is like this really like big dude who's like, he's like a lover, not a fighter type person. And I forget where he comes from. I think he comes from Amity, and he has a crush on Trish. And like when I first read those moments with him, I was just like, yeah, it's kind of obvious that he likes you, Trish, like, and you don't like him back. And like I felt so bad for him because like he would cry in the middle of the night because he knew that he was gonna get kicked off, and Trish in her head was just like, you baby, like, why are you crying? Like, you're the last person I would think who would cry, and like, that's so like careless of you and selfish of you. And I'm like, Trish, like, he's away from his family, he's never gonna see them again, and he could very well become factionless, like, or die, you know? Like, it didn't make a lot of sense to me as to why she was hating him so much. And then there were moments in the novel where like, oh, she was friends with him, like he would pick her up and like hang out with her and make her laugh, and like they became friends. But at the same time she would also say stuff like, I don't like him that way and he gets on my nerves. And I'm like, okay, just let him be nice to you. Like, you don't have to be an asshole to the guy. Like, Jesus, like, he's just like, just tell him you just want to be friends. It's not that hard, Trish. You're 16. They do their initiation thing, basically tested, because they have higher up officials. So Four is one of their mentors, along with another character named Eric, who is an erudite transfer, and he's a total ass. He basically wants to make their life a living hell. So he tells them like, oh yeah, you're starting an initiation. And the characters are like, what do you mean we got to choose you guys? Why do we have to be tested? And they're like, well, we have to choose you now. And, you know, hearing that the first time when I first read it, I was like, oh my God, that's so crazy. Like, they could become factionless. I mean, that was a really big momentous thing to say. Like, okay, you chose us, now we get to choose you. And I'm like, that's kind of true in life. So you got that one right. Trish is kind of trying to hide her divergentness, and all the other characters are trying to hide their like eruditeness and their candorness, and like, you're lying and I can tell when you lie because you bite your lower lip. That's mostly Christina, which like I feel like that's her only personality trait a lot of the times, because like every time she comes up it's always like, I can tell when you're lying, I can tell when you're lying. Like, okay, do you have another personality other than I can tell when you're lying? Like, I feel like that's what a lot of their character traits are. It's like that's all their personality is. Like Will, he's like a know-it-all. He's like, oh, you didn't memorize the whole entire like state of Illinois and like how to get on the train and back and here and there. It's like, no, Will, I didn't. I'm sorry. Like, do you have another personality? Like how Peter is just an asshole, and I believe he came from Candor too. And he's just, that's all he is. Like, they don't have a lot of other personality traits, which is kind of annoying because I'm like, okay, I understand that like you're a part of different factions, but like you came to Dauntless, so clearly you have more character to you than just being like, I can tell when you're lying. Like, where are your other character traits? They have to train for fighting, and they have to learn how to hold a gun, and like Trish is, you know, getting tips from Four and she thinks he's hot, and I have to sneeze. They come to find out that they have to do these simulations to like help them overcome their fears, even though they never overcome them. And then so their first round of initiation was like a lot of fighting. Trish is not a good fighter. She's more of like a quick fast-paced person on her feet, and like Four gives her pointers on that. They are visited by their parents on visiting day, and then Trish mostly gets to see her mom a lot, but like a lot of their interactions are like, Mom, how do you know this, and what's going on, and like, what do you mean, why is being divergent a bad thing? Like, it's all these questions that are never really answered by her mom, and her mom is just really secretive, and we don't get to know her as a person. Like, all we find out is that she was originally from Dauntless, and that's it. Like, we don't find out like how brave she was or this and this and this, and it's kind of just like, no, she's still just the mom of a politician, basically. We don't really get to know much about her, and we're supposed to feel this connection towards her. Then Trish gets to see 4 drunk, which in my head I was like, oh my god, you're teenagers, but then I'm like, wait, you're 18? And then they talk about how like Dauntless, most of them don't live to like 30 because they die really young, which is really weird, but I guess, okay. So Trish is like, I get to see 4 drunk, and like, okay, hi drunk 4. You know what, it's nice to see you cool and mellowed out and chill. One momentous scene that you get to witness, which I don't know why, like when I reread it I was like, that was a really quick scene. Like things happen very quickly in this novel, I notice, as she's initiating into their faction, integrating herself into it. So like the moment that she went into Dauntless, she got a tattoo of ravens on her chest to like signify her family, which again, I understand they're her family, but I don't feel like they're very significant because it's like we don't know too much about them other than they're your family. Like, okay, I guess like family, like it doesn't matter what you do, you're still my family kind of thing. But then their motto is also faction before blood, so it's kind of like, I can tell that that was like really thought about while writing this, because like it doesn't seem like the parents have much to do with anything, because it's like faction before blood. Like even though I'm supposed to have this attachment with my parents because they're my parents, I don't really know anything about your parents. Like, so it is like faction before blood because I know more about your faction than I do about your parents. So that's just one of my gripes. She also gets a tattoo of the abnegation symbol along with the dauntless symbol, I believe on her shoulders, if I'm not mistaken. But one moment is where Trish gets to zip line with some of the other initiates, because there are initiates who are transfers and initiates who are already dauntless people. She gets to zip line with a bunch of the dauntless initiates who Uriah, who's a main character later on in the story, it's like you're introducing all these characters and like nothing's happening with them until like they're important later on. They're just kind of like props if you really think about it. They're just props to be used later on, and we don't get to know the character. Do a zip lining through Chicago, which I always thought was cool. That would be, as much as I have a fear of heights, doing a zip line would be cool. They also get to do capture the flag, and Trish gets to find out more about Four and his fear. She finds out that he has a fear of heights because they're like trying to hide their flag, and Trish is like, oh, well, we're by the Ferris wheel, like let's just like go up on the Ferris wheel. And then she almost dies because of that. Ford's having like a heart attack as he's like going up the Ferris wheel, and I'm like, I feel you, Ford. Like I don't know why you like this girl, because she's freaking crazy going up a Ferris wheel that you don't even know if it works or not. They end up winning capture the flag, and I believe Christina is the one that ends up getting the flag, even though Trish could have gotten it. And then later on Christina talks about like, oh, I'm sorry, I should have let you gotten the flag, but whatever, you know, like. And then I think Trish kind of like has a grudge against Christina, or like there's something there, but like it never gets developed. We get into the second round of initiation where it's their fear landscape, and basically Trish finds out more about Four's fears. She already knew that he had a fear of heights, which is a very common thing. But then she finds out like, oh, this is the reason why they call me Four, because I have 4 fears. Ha ha ha. Like I'm a cool badass. Like nobody's ever heard of that, which I mean is true, but still. And then we find out that like Trish is afraid to get basically ridiculed by people and like to be found out that she's a divergent. That's like her like main few fears, because she gets attacked by birds, she gets attacked by like her fellow initiates, and well, she's like in a glass dome area and they're all laughing at her and picking on her. She's afraid of like just not being in control of the situation is pretty much her fears. And then she's also afraid of intimacy, because the running joke in the story is that she's a stiff, so like she doesn't know what meat is because they don't eat meat for some weird reason which I don't understand that, because abnegation is also in charge of all the food, so like why don't you eat meat? Like, and then her reasoning is because like, oh, we can't like take pleasure in eating like delicious seasoned food. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, they make fun of her because she doesn't know what a burger is. She doesn't know about intimacy, and like they talk about how like certain characters like her, or she sees other characters kissing and she's like, oh my god, why are they doing that in public? Like, okay, can you be much more of a prude? Like, Jesus. Like, I'm starting to think that, like, they were right to call you a stiff, Trish, because you kind of are. It's because one of her fears is to be intimate with Four, whose real name is Tobias, and he basically confessed to her that he loved her, and she's just like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. And I'm like, you're 16, Trish. You don't trust your gut. And then she keeps bringing up to him like, you're older, you're 18 years, you're 2 years older than me, why do you like me? And I'm like, okay, like, it's not that big of a deal, Trish. Just because he's 2 years older than you does not mean that he can't like you. And then she's like, I'm not that pretty, and he's like, yeah, I know you're not that pretty. And I'm like, ooh. Like, wow, that would be hurtful. If a guy said that to me and he was dating me, I would be like, you don't think I'm pretty? Like, okay. I mean, I understand that there's more to just looks and personality, but like, Trish doesn't have much of a personality. For his fears, he's afraid of heights. He's also afraid of, you know, being in enclosed spaces. They have like an intimate moment of like Trish trying to calm him down because she ends up going into his fear landscape. And she's like, I'm trying to calm you down. And she's like, just listen to my heartbeat. And he's like, but your heartbeat is really fast. Like, why is that, Trish? And she's like, well, because I'm in a closed space with a boy that I don't even know. And I'm like, yeah, that's the reason why, Trish. Okay. And then we find out like who he really is, that he was Tobias, who is the son of a guy named Marcus, who is also a government official of abnegation. And like, he was one of the only other people to have transfer from an abnegation. And it turns out that he shows signs of Divergent. She finds out that Al has a thing for her, and she kind of rejects him. And she's like, I don't really like you that way. Can we just be friends? She doesn't say that, but she kind of just like pushes him away. And then what ends up happening is that him and Peter and a couple other guys end up trying to push her over the edge, which is called the Pit, I believe. Basically, they live in a place called the Pit. It's basically just a cave. And then they try to throw her into the like water that's like near their cave area. And I forgot to mention, there are a couple incidences to deal with like this pit area, cave water area. Because originally Christina almost fell because she was talking too much to Eric in the beginning of their initiation stage, and she almost fell and he wasn't going to pick her up. And then there was another time where Trish almost got thrown over the water, and they talk about how like a lot of people commit suicide on this area. And I'm like, like as a kid I didn't pick up on this, but like now that I know and like looking at it, I'm like, there's a lot to do with this like alcove of water. I wonder why. Is somebody gonna die? Like, what's gonna happen? Because people are basically getting kicked off because they're gonna be factionless, people are starting to attack each other. So one instance, and this is a really great example of Trish's behavior that I feel like just doesn't fit her character well, because she's 16, and I feel like any 16-year-old in this situation would basically just shut down, wouldn't know what to do. Like any normal like 16-year-old who's never experienced trauma before, I feel like they would just shut down and be like, I don't know what to do. Just like have the adults do it, not me. Because I'm 22, and I feel like if I was in this situation, I would do the same thing, and I would probably freak the fuck out. When Trish was befriending Al, basically he was back talking and they were shooting knives, I think, or something like that. And Eric is like, oh, go stand in front of the target. And I completely forgot that it was originally Al who was gonna stand in front of the target, and then Trish volunteers and she's like, anybody can stand in front of a target. And then so Four is throwing knives at her and she's like, I can't flinch. And like, I'm sorry, but like, here are a few instances where like Trish's character, it's like, how could a 16-year-old act that way in that situation? Because I'm 22 and I wouldn't act this way in a situation. Because in her head, when she's standing in front of the target, she's like, I can't flinch. Okay, name how many times you flinched when somebody just did this to you, because I've flinched before. Now imagine a knife going at your head. You don't think you're gonna flinch a little bit? Because you're gonna flinch. There is a projectile about to hit you in the head. And then he's like, oh, you have to keep your eyes open. And I'm like, okay, no normal 16-year-old would just like perfectly stand still, not be freaking the hell out. Like, I understand she's a Divergent and like, oh, she's special and like she can take it, but like no 16-year-old would just like stand there and not like put their hands up and flinch. Like, you got knives thrown at you. I don't care if it's your good-looking boyfriend who's 18 and has a good aim, okay? No 16-year-old is gonna be able to do that. And then of course he nicks her because he's like, oh, I had to, because if I didn't, then Eric would have thought that, you know, I was going easy on you. That was one instance of like her being kind of, you know, passive, kind of, in a sense. Like, I have to be a robot. Like, I feel like that's kind of how her personality is. Like, I don't have emotions, just don't think about it, don't flinch, I'm a robot, I'm still, like, I don't have a personality, kind of, in a sense. And then another instance was that, so some of the characters were like, oh, well, like, if this person is doing better in the initiation stage, we have to get rid of them. So Peter, being the asshole that he is, he attacked this one character named Edward, or Edwin, I believe, in the middle of the night. And for some weird reason, when I read this book, I thought it was a fork, because in my head I'm like, it would have been so much better if it was a fork instead of a knife. So they stabbed him in the eye with a knife, but I feel like it should have been a fork. That would have been a lot more interesting. But anyway, so it was a knife, and he's like yelling at everybody. He's like, it hurts, get out. And I'm like, the way he like talks, it doesn't seem like, I don't know, I would be screaming my head off. Like, I feel like there should have been like some line of like, he was in hysteria mode. And then Trish, for some weird reason, is like completely calm, and she's like, you can't take it out, wait for the nurse. And like, she goes into this mode of like, I'm serious, I know what to do, I've seen this a million times before, we're calm, collected, and cool, but at the same time we're 16, we don't know what the hell we're doing, but I'm gonna stay calm for you. I'm sorry, but like, if I was in that situation, I'd be fainting at the sight of somebody's eye being stabbed with a knife. I would be hitting the floor, okay? Personality is kind of like fight or flight mode, and every single time she's in a situation, it's always like, I'm gonna fight, but I'm also gonna shut down at the same time and not be a normal human being and like act like a robot and feel like I know what I'm doing. That's kind of how her personality is. And like, I don't fully believe her being that way. And the reason why I bring that up is because later on they try to kill Trish. So it's Al and Peter, and they're trying to throw her over an alcove, and like apparently they kind of like sexually assault her, which I don't remember happening at all. So they try to sexually assault her, Peter does. They run away because they get beat up by Four, who ends up finding her and like takes care of her, and he's like, you have to show them that you're, you know, you're not weak. Another thing about Four was that he was abused by his father as a kid and beaten a lot. She finds out that Al was a part of her kidnapping, so then Al gets into a depression. She doesn't like him, she hates him, she's like, I never want to fucking talk to you ever again, don't touch me. And then Al ends up committing suicide. So that was really heartbreaking, because I'm like, oh, poor Al, he just liked you, and then, I mean, he shouldn't have done what he did, but then at the same time, like, he committed suicide. And then they were talking about how like suicide is praised kind of in the Dauntless community, because it's like, oh, it's such a mark of bravery because like you're facing the unknown, and in every other faction it's like really disproved upon, but nobody talks about it. And I'm like, maybe you shouldn't be teaching suicide and depression in this novel this way. I'm just saying, you're having emotional teenagers read these books, and maybe don't talk about suicide that way. I'm just saying. And like, that whole entire conversation just kind of like rubbed me the wrong way. Trish and Four end up becoming a thing, and so does Will and Christina. One thing that I do appreciate knowing a little bit more about one of the characters' personalities was Christina, and how she's afraid of moths. It's never brought up again. It's just that she's afraid of moths. Like, okay. Christina tells Trish about like, oh, like, let's be girls for like a few minutes, and like, let me tell you, like, me and Will kissed, and then we just talked like we were just friends. And I'm like, oh, that's really cute, like, you guys are together, but like, I also don't know your personalities very well, so I can't be fully happy for her. And like, the only reason why that happens is because something else has to happen later on. So like I'm saying, they're basically just props to set other things in motion. That's kind of all that they are in the story, other than Trish That's all I really are. Trish ends up going and seeing her brother because her mom told her to go and ask him about the serum thing Erudite is developing. They get into a fight, and then she ends up meeting the higher up official of Erudite, Janine, and she's supposed to be the villain of the story, and they're not supposed to leave their factions. So she gets in trouble. Janine is like, so like your test results were inconclusive, and like what's going on there? It's like you could tell that like she already knows that she's divergent, but she just doesn't want to do anything about it. And like this whole entire time, like you're kind of just thinking like, well, what does divergent mean? And like finally find out later on that it just means that like they can't control them with the serums. So like with Trish, when she does, because they get injected for serums for their fear simulation, and basically she can just control the simulation. That's all it really is that the simulation doesn't really work on her because she can control it. So like one instance is like she's drowning in this like big giant glass container and she can just break the glass, whereas like most people can't do that because Trish knows that it's all fake, which is kind of interesting because like wouldn't everybody be able to do that because they all know that they're in a simulation, but I guess their brain just doesn't think that. But like in my head I'm like, I'm pretty sure I would realize that it was a simulation too, because like I don't know. Then the meat of the story starts to happen. War is at the front steps of the Dauntless community because apparently the higher ups in Dauntless are associating themselves with Erudite, who wants to kill all of the abnegation. This whole entire time Erudite has been like publishing these news articles about how like Erudite is taking all our food, and even though they're supposed to be like our leaders, they're not really like doing anything, and we need to like rise up. And isn't it weird that Beatrice's parents lost their kids to Dauntless? Like there has to be something there, isn't there? And like they can't be trusted. So like that's pretty much what's just been going on. It's like propaganda, pretty much just saying like they're a bad influence and this and this and this. So then Dauntless officials are like associating themselves with Erudite to make this serum to control the Dauntless, to kill the abnegation. So basically they're being mind controlled, pretty much in a sense. Trish, she wakes up to find that her friends are over here, you know, being mind controlled, and then she's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And this is another instance of like, oh, fight or flight mode, and she kind of just shuts down and becomes this robot of like, I have to stand perfectly still while I'm pretending to be mindless. Like, we shall go this way, now we shall go this way. Like, I don't know, like it just doesn't feel normal for her to be like that, because then there's like one point where I think they were like touching her, like the people who were awake, who are the higher ups. Eric is like touching her and is like, oh, like look, I can do whatever to her, and she's just like not flinching. And then like he holds a gun up to Will's head, not Will's head, he holds a gun up to Forrest's head and is like, oh, do you think anybody would miss him? The weird thing is like they talk about how like, oh, like he's divergent and this and this and this, and he only had 4 fears. The same thing is kind of true with Trish, where like she can go through her fear simulation really quickly and everybody's really envious of her, which was something that I didn't understand fully, because if that was true and she could like go through it really quickly when she was doing her last like final fear landscape, wouldn't it be bad that she finished it really quickly? And I think she did, and she was like first place, but nobody said anything. Like, I don't know, I feel like that should have been like Janine being like, hey, you did this way too quickly, you're divergent. But no, that didn't happen until later on. Trish is like, oh, like, you know, she points a gun at him and she's like, step away from him, and he's like, you're not gonna shoot me, and then she shoots him in the leg. And I'm like, that has to be my favorite scene, is when she's just like, why don't you think I'm gonna shoot you? And then she shoots him in the leg. I mean, she took down Molly, who was like this big, you know, girl who could beat the shit out of her, and like nobody believes that Trish can do stuff, which, I mean, fair point. She is really small and petite, and like she doesn't have a lot going for her other than she can like pretend to be the mindless robot person that she can be. They end up trying to escape, but then I think Trish gets shot, and then Janine, she like finds them and she tells them like, oh, take 4, get tested on, because they wanted to do another sampling of the mind control on him to like counteract the effects of being divergent and to like control him better. But it's funny because Janine's like, how did you 4 slip through the system? And I think it's because like her Trisha's mom did bring up how like, oh, abnegation people, a lot of them are divergent. She's like, oh, because I'm divergent too, but like we're never like talked more about that she's divergent. So then 4 gets mind controlled, whatever. Her mom ends up freeing her. They end up going to their hideout with where a lot of the abnegation are hiding, which is where Marcus, her dad, and her brother are hiding, and a bunch of other people. Her mom ends up getting shot. Literally the last third of this novel is where everything kind of falls into play, and you start to see that like all these characters didn't really have a personality trait, and they were all kind of just used as props to set other things in motion. We're supposed to feel this like emotion for her mom, and like I do kind of feel a little bit of that emotion, but I just needed more there. Like I needed her mom to be more caring towards Trish, like, oh, like I want to help you, but no, she was kind of just really distant, not telling her anything, and like being really standoffish, you know? And that kind of is annoying because then she dies, she gets shot, and Trish just leaves her. She doesn't go back. And I'm pretty sure in the movie they do have Trish actually go and like help her mom and not want to leave her side. In the book, she just leaves. She doesn't go back. She's just like, I know my mom got shot. Bye, mom. I'm not gonna say goodbye. I'm gonna keep running to the hideout. And like, to me, that kind of just makes me further think that like the mom was just a prop. Like clearly she didn't care about her mom enough if she wasn't gonna go back and, you know, say goodbye to her. Like, okay, my mom just got shot, bye. Like, just, like, I'm supposed to feel something for this character dying. That's why you kill off a character. Because Trish is also like talking later on about like, oh, you know, I can't believe my mom just died, and like this like it's so devastating, and I can't cry. I can only cry for like 5 minutes when I'm with 4, and then I have to get back up again. Literally, those are her words. In my head, I'm like, do you not have any emotion, woman? That happens. Then she goes and meets the group of abnegation people, and like her dad sees that she has tattoos, and so does her brother, and they're like, you've changed, and what have we done? Kind of like the teen angst like type of parents, like, oh my god, like you got a tattoo. She's like shooting people left and right. I'm pretty sure it's just because she has all that pent-up anger and emotion about her mom dying, because she's like, we're just gonna kill everybody. Everybody's just gonna die now. Like, but then at the same time, she's like, we have to like stop Dauntless from killing all of the abnegations, while Trish is also letting people die and get killed. And like, I'm sorry, but like, okay, the last like 3/3 of this book is kind of annoying because like so much happens, so many people die, and you can tell that they're all just props. They were all just props for them to die. It was just meant to happen. That was just how it was gonna happen. But then what ends up happening, what really pisses me off about Trish, and this is why I really don't like her. Can you tell that I don't like Trish? Because I don't like her. She's very meh. She's not a great character. Like, there's nothing to her. But then when she's in situations, it's always like fight or flight mode for her. That's her character, fight or flight. But the way she talks about some of the people that die, it's kind of like, oh, well, I couldn't do anything else. This was my only option to do. That's all I could do. You could have went back for your mom. You didn't have to leave. And then right after that, which is another messed up moment, because you could tell that this character was just a prop, because we don't know anything else about him other than he's a know-it-all. And no, it is not Caleb. We will get to Caleb in the next 2 books, because I have a lot to say about Caleb. It's Will. So Will is after her, shooting a gun because, of course, he's under mind control, and, you know, mind control makes people do crazy things, right? And everybody's forgiven afterwards because, of course, Trish didn't go back to save her mom. So what does she do to Will? Okay, keep this in mind. She had a chance to shoot Eric in the head, okay? But she shot him in the foot. And Eric is an asshole, okay? He's a jerk, he deserved to die, and I believe he does die eventually. But what does she do to Will? Will, who is under mind control, who you know isn't gonna stop, who isn't gonna, you know, do anything. What does she do? She ends up killing her friend and her best friend's boyfriend. rather than shooting him in the leg like she did to Eric. Can you tell we don't know anything about these characters? Because I don't know much about Will other than he was a know-it-all who also happened to be in a relationship with Christina, and that's what makes the stakes even higher because, oh, he was my friend. I don't really know much about him, but he also was dating my best friend, and now I have to shoot him because I have to shoot him. But literally 5 minutes ago, I shot Eric in the foot when in reality, he should have died. And I could have just shot Will in the foot and that would have stopped him from shooting me. Where does it make sense? Like, oh, bad guy gets to live. Best friend's boyfriend, who is also my friend, he dies. He gets to die. Yeah, he gonna die today. Even though he's under mind control. Like, okay. Let's just kill off the character we don't have a lot of information about because he's a prop. Because all he was meant for was to give Trish the emotional, you know, trauma and for her to like not be close friends with Christine anymore because I killed your boyfriend. I'm sorry. That pisses me off. And then the only reason why her mom died was because mom just had to die. Just had to add more emotional trauma to die. So she's like, I killed my best friend. You can tell that I don't like some of the choices in this novel. Anyways, so then, if you didn't think the emotional trauma of characters dying, that you don't know anything about them, but you're supposed to feel emotion for them because why? Because they cause conflict later on. That's why. So the good people die and the bad people just get to live in these stories. I don't know why. That's just the way life works, right? Because that just, you know, the good ones die young. The good ones always die young. But anyway, so then if you didn't think that was enough, no, we gotta have a third death before everything else is done. So, you know, she goes back. She doesn't tell them that she killed her best friend. She doesn't tell, you know, her brother, and because they don't care. They're just like, you know, whatever. And literally her dad literally tells her like, you can't go around shooting people. He literally told you that, Trish. And what do? Oh, let me shoot Will. Let me just kill him. Let me just shoot him and kill him. This isn't gonna have repercussions later on. It's fine. We don't know this guy, but we're supposed to feel something for that. Anyway, so moving on. The rescue team, and she's like, yeah, we have to go back and stop them because they're all gonna become murderers because, you know, we don't want the Dauntless to become murderers even though I just became a murderer like 5 seconds ago. So like, yeah, we can't do that, you know. Christine might become a murderer. She might also be dead. And I think at one point Trish even like hopes that she's dead because she doesn't want her to find out that she killed her boyfriend. Gather a group. Marcus goes with them and she's like, I don't like Marcus. Marcus, her dad, and Caleb. And they're going and they're like trying to find, you know, where the serum is and like how to shut it all down. They end up, she tells her dad to like cover her for like, because they're gonna get shot at. Her dad gets shot. He ends up dying. I don't remember if she like goes back to him or not. She probably didn't. But at the same time too though, we don't know anything about her dad other than like he kind of was secretive too because he's like, I know how to sew people up and like stitch up your wounds and this and this and this and like, I love you, sweetheart, but also why are you getting tattoos? Like we learn all this information within like a few pages and then he's dead. So am I supposed to feel something for this man? Because I feel a little bit for him because I'm like, you know, if he just didn't have Trish, none of this would be happening right now. Finding Four, and Four almost kills her and she's just like, yeah, just shoot me, just here's the gun, just point it at my head, it's fine. I deserve to die after what I just did to my mom and my brother. You know, everything else. You know what, Four, just kill me now. I already killed 3 people who didn't deserve to die. I should have just killed Eric. I should have just killed Janine when I had the chance. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But no, Four, when they got captured, Four was the one that was fighting. Four was there coming in clutch. I like Four more than I like Trish. But anyway, so Four comes out of it. He's like, where am I? I love you. Let's get going. Okay, I'm going to shut down the simulation. I'm a tech nerd. We're going to do this in a few minutes. And then everybody's saved afterwards. Along the way, Peter ends up like helping them out because Trish like shoots him. He comes along with them because he's just like, I don't want to be here. Even though he was the only other initiate who was awake. Okay. Like, I guess, like, he thinks that they're gonna kill him, so he's like, I'm just gonna go with you. Literally, Peter does the most 180 things in this series. He's like, I'm just gonna do the opposite of what everybody else does because I want to be on the winning team. That's the only reason why he does things. That's the only reason why he does stuff. 4 joins them. His dad is there, of course, and like, you know, 4 got daddy issues. Marcus is just like, son, don't you son him. Don't do that. 4 seems like such a strong-willed character, but then like the moment he sees his dad, it's like pure fear. And I'm kind of like, I like that subtlety that like, okay, like, yeah, the guy was very traumatic in your life and like you're hiding behind Trish, although I don't think Trish is gonna do anything because she's like very small. But then again, she might shoot your dad in the leg and end up killing him. So yeah, let's just not give Trish a gun. Let's just don't. They shut the simulation down. I would say that's like my one gripe with this story, is just because the characters don't have a lot of depth to them. They're just very faction oriented. Like, that's their whole personality, is their faction. That is literally their personality. And then Trish is just kind of like fight or flight character, right? Because they're like, we have to run because Erudite is going to be on our ass in like 5 minutes if we don't leave. 4 shuts the simulation down because he's that good, okay? 4 comes in clutch. What does Trish do? She just shoots everybody. She makes out with 4 because she's like, why not? Who cares? It's fine. Everything is fine. Let's just be in our own little world. I believe they go to Amity afterwards because they're like, we have to go to Amity where they won't find us, you know. They make this whole entire plan within like a few minutes of like, okay, we shut it down, now we go. We run, we ride on the train till sunset. Trish literally, she goes and tells 4, she's like, my parents died today. Who cares? It's fine. Everything is fine. Trish, you kind of caused a lot of that death. Like, you have nobody to blame but yourself. Instantly, they're like, we're at war. Trish is like, I'm factionless. I can't believe this. And I'm like, dude, forget if you're fucking factionless. Your parents died. And I look like a raccoon, don't I? Your parents died. And you killed your best friend's boyfriend. Why are you still alive? Poor Al, what did he ever do to you? Like, I understand that they try to kill you, but still. Like, literally, I felt more emotion for Al than I did for when Will died. Or for when her mom and her dad died. I remember when I first read the book, I did feel a lot more emotion towards Will because I was like, oh my god, no, Will. But now that I've reread it, I'm like, I don't really know much about Will. Because there were even points where like the characters, her own friends, were like starting to not like her because they were kind of like, are you just like playing us and just being like, oh, I'm really weak-minded and stuff, and then you kick our ass in initiation just to get ahead. Like, there were moments where they were starting to like not like her, and I'm like, well, that's cool character development because like now they're kind of like going against her, but then like we don't really get to see much more than that. And now Christina's gonna kick Trish's ass for killing her boyfriend. Poor Will. They run to Amity, and that's the end of the story for now. Overall thoughts. It's not a bad book. I'm surprised that I still kind of enjoyed it, and I still chuckled a couple of times while reading it. Horrible. I really do love 4. I love his brooding character of like, oh, I'm, you know, secretive and I'm slightly a divergent, and like, I love you, Trish. And I don't like his real name. I'm sorry, Tobias. I'm never gonna call him that. I'm gonna call him 4 for the rest of time because it just sounds better. As I've read it again as an adult, a young adult actually, a lot of the characters are just props. That's pretty much what they are. They don't really have a lot of personality to them other than them being faction personality, which I guess goes along with the theme of them, you know, being controlled and doing what the system tells them to do because they fit in little niches. Al is just there so that he can commit suicide and to kind of pose as conflict for him to get in the way of 4 and Trish's relationship, sort of, and to like, you know, be that reminder of like, well, she was attacked by a homeless guy, a factionless on the street, and then now she's in the initiation stage, she's being attacked and sexually assaulted by people, and then now she has a fear of intimacy because she doesn't want to be intimate before, and like all this other stuff happened, which I think is a subtle way of doing that, which is nice. But at the same time though, like, it's only initiated by characters. Like, Al had to do that so that he could commit suicide. Christina is her best friend because, you know, she has to be her best friend because otherwise it wouldn't be dramatic if Will died for no reason. And her mom dies just because her mom dies, and her dad dies because her dad dies. We know more about the mom than we do the dad, which I guess it counts for something, but all the characters are just props, and so does Peter, because literally Peter goes along with them just because. Like, he's just like, I'm just gonna go along with you. They're all props. They just set in motion other events so that the book can progress, is pretty much what it is. The only moment that I felt like I appreciated her was when she shot Eric in the foot, because I was like, finally you did something that was like worthwhile. I mean, like, there was that point where like she vouched for like sitting in front of the Target for Al. Right off the bat, like, I could just tell that like Trish really has nothing to live for. I never knew that when I was younger. When I was younger, I still didn't think she was that much of a badass. I still felt like she's just a normal girl. Like, why the hell did she go into Dauntless? Like, I used to think that. I was like, why Dauntless of all places? Like, I kind of felt like she fit into Abnegation. And even when I was younger, I kind of even thought like her story, I feel like another faction character could have been a little bit more interesting than her. Could also say like, oh, but she lives for 4, but even like, she doesn't even tell him she loves him at the end of the novel. He tells her, and they joke about how like, oh, like, when you're ready to love me back. And like, I don't know if she ever tells him she loves him until like, it is a story about her, but at the same time, like, she just doesn't have anything to push her. Like, she like needs that like moment of like, okay, this is what I live for, you know. And to me, it's like 4 has more of that than she does. Like, 4 lives for her. I feel like Christina put it best where she said to Trish, I'm thinking that you have a death wish, like you want to die because you have nothing to live for. In this whole entire story, she truly does. She doesn't really have a lot of emotion. Like I said, she kind of just acts like a robot. She's in fight or flight mode all the time. It's like she was just put in there for circumstance. Like, there's nothing really special about her. You're okay, Trish. You don't offend me. You know, don't offend me in any way, but you're just like, I put it this way, anybody could play Trish. You could put any other character in her shoes and it probably wouldn't be much different. She's just like she's a blank face, kind of, in a sense. And yeah, speaking of faces, I don't know if I ever caught this, like, well, I think I did when I was reading it the first time, but like, there was always something that like perplexed me. Like, you know how some authors will write about like characters' faces, like, oh my god, they have like colored eyes. But I noticed with Veronica, she would constantly bring up the characters' noses for some weird reason. And I think one character had like a crooked hooked nose, and I was just like, what the hell does that look like? I'm like, how do you have a hooked nose? Like, literally you could replace Trish with Christine, and then we could have had an iconic scene of Christine being attacked by a swarm of moths. That would have been cool. I'm not gonna lie, that would have been pretty interesting. Like, there are a few things that I like in this story that I feel like they hit a little bit home for me. One, for the fact that it's being set in Chicago. Good old Chicago. And the other thing too is that they bring up chocolate cake. I'm a sucker for chocolate cake. I truly am. Veronica, if you are a fan of chocolate cake, I can appreciate that. I think when they were on the Ferris wheel, Trish was just like, you're afraid of heights? And he is like, well, not necessarily the heights, more so like, you know, the falling part of it. And I'm like, you know, that's literally me though, because whenever somebody asks me, they're like, you're afraid of heights? Like, you're just high up. And I'm like, it's not the height part that I'm afraid of, okay? It's the part where the wind's gonna carry me off and I'm gonna fall to my death. That's the part that I'm afraid of. So like, my overall thoughts of this novel were that. And also, if I were to give this a rating, I'm pretty sure on my my Goodreads, I gave it a 4 out of 5. I think I would either keep it as a 4 out of 5 stars or as a 3.5 star. But it did make me laugh, which I appreciated. The other thing too is that it actually inspired me to get back into writing again, because ironically, when I first read this book was the novel that inspired me to write my own novel. So yeah, surprisingly, even though like I'm not a huge fan of it, but reading it inspired me to write again, and I'm like, oh, I want to write my novel again. I want to work on more chapters. I hope I can do more of these videos, and so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, anything anything like that, please leave them down below. If you like videos like this, subscribe, give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see all you guys in the next video. Bye.